I am now surrounded by talented people who care about my goals as much as I do. I graduated from that program and even said in my graduation speech how just backwards my mind frame was when I entered the program, thinking, okay, I've got to I'm not going to go out for drinks. I'm going to stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning reading my case studies. I realized so quickly that that didn't matter. What happened in class, people forgot it the next day. It didn't matter. But the relationships that I built ended up being the most important value that I took away from that program.
There's a different kind of sickness that comes from not seeing people in the flesh. We spent years locked in, logged on, doom scrolling through a world that doesn't exist. But out there, in pubs, in living rooms, on mountaintops, at knitting circles, people are still finding each other. This is Real Meat. I'm your host, Brian Feaster. Let's go meet someone.
Hey, everybody. I'm joined by Kristin Kenzy. She is a friend of mine, fellow entrepreneur, and just an all-around fun person. So I figured she'd be a great person to talk to because she has a number of different experiences that I think are super interesting from a community building perspective. But anyway, Kristin, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your origin story? So when I say that, what I'm thinking of is how you grew up as a figure skater, eventually became a competitive figure skater. In my mind, that is a community unto itself. I feel like in general, sports are. And I was just curious, maybe if you could talk a little bit about how that sort of formed you as a person.
Well, thanks for having me, Brian. This is exciting. It's fun. I'm glad that you are launching this podcast about communities because I think communities are really important as businesses as well as just pillars of our society. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I was a figure skater. And what's interesting about figure skating, and I've never really connected my figure skating career with any of the work that I do in communities. So I'm really glad that you brought this up because you've got my wheels spinning now in a different way. Figure skating is an individual sport, right? So it's not like a team. You would think, obviously, a hockey team, that's its own little community, or a volleyball team, that's its own little community. But figure skating's weird because I was training with girls who were my best friends because we were sharing this crazy experience of being competitive figure skaters and then going away to competition and watching each other compete, hoping the best for each other, but then simultaneously kind of hoping that they fall on their ass because we want to win. So it's a very weird thing to battle with as an adolescent. And just talking through it now with you, it's almost what careers can be like too, right? Like when you go to work, you're making a lot of friends with your colleagues, but you're typically vying for the same promotions or similar opportunities. And there's that weird balance that has to occur when you are trying to build relationships with those people. And I guess I started that very early. I started that at 8 years old, right?
That's why I was so interested because having read Drunk Business Advice, and I'm a big fan. I was a fan before I was a friend for those who are listening. I first ran into Kristin just as a subscriber to her newsletter, which I think is awesome. I'm a big fan, like I said, and I regularly do read it, which is, I think you're on a list of one, maybe two, so it's hard to keep up with my inbox. It's a pretty busy place. Anyway, all that's just a long way of saying that hearing your story, and I've heard much about the ice skating thing. I just thought that was a really significant formative experience. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have any of the success I have in my life if it weren't for the lessons that skating taught me. But what I think about and what most people think about when they think of lessons learned from skating, it's lessons like resilience, it's lessons like discipline and work ethic and the preparation, execution, review cycle. But what I'm thinking about now is just the lessons that I learned with regard to relationships, because I had to be, I didn't have friends at school. So that's the other part of my origin story that's sort of, that I think is worth touching on, given that I've now spent the last few years of my career as a community manager.
Yeah.
I didn't have friends at school. I had friends at the rink. I had bullies at school and friends at the rink. Yet the people at the rink were the ones that I should have been at odds with because we were technically competitors. So what drove that? And I think it was the shared experience of working hard together. And then
absolutely.
needing those relationships, right? If I don't have relationships at school simply because those other kids don't understand what it's like to wake up at 4 a.m. every morning for 10 years and just hurtle yourself into crazy jumps on the ice and injure yourself and all of that, you're kind of forced to find someone who can relate to that in the real world. And I think at any level of elite performance, whether it's in business or in athletics or art or anything else, the people who truly get it are the people who are your biggest opponents that you're competing with for that top spot, because they are the ones that have been doing the same thing you have been doing. So it's a very weird dynamic, right? Those are the people who get you and where the deepest relationships lie. But at the same time, you know, it's hard to open up to them. It's hard to be, you know, your competitors at the end of the day. And so I think that actually caused me to push people away for a long time in my life. I used to think growing up that you could have friends or you could have success, but not both. I now know as an adult that's not true, and that was a horrible frame of mind for me to grow up in, but that was the nature of my surroundings, and probably why I've leaned so much into relationships and community later in life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a little bit similar. I was bullied at a young age, and it kind of made me a survival of the fittest kind of person, which is quite similar to your description of competitive figure skating and that sort of like, you know, you either win or you lose in life and there's no in between. So what was the transition for you? Was there something specific, or was it just time, you know, that sort of made you transition, or how did that happen from being, again, I relate a lot to that mindset, and then to becoming more community minded?
So I think that the biggest, and I'm embarrassed by how long this took me, right? So I'm going to say that it's fairly recent that I've experienced this transition from being kind of a solo, on my own kind of person to being very community minded. And that was in my mid 30s. I was accepted into an executive real estate program at Harvard University.
Okay.
Which for me was a huge deal. I never even got an undergraduate degree. So the thought that Harvard would be interested in me as a student was, I mean, frankly, impossible in my mind. And I went into this program believing I was there for the education, believing this is just one of the most prolific educational institutions, right? That I was going to learn so much. I was going to gain access to the top minds, and I was going to exit this program having just the best education I possibly could have had. And part of that was true, but what I completely dismissed when I began the program was the value of the relationships with the other students. It's crazy because in that very first day that I went on campus, I was so nervous. I mean, I was totally shitting myself. I felt so out of place. I felt like crazy imposter syndrome. And I was surrounded by all of these incredibly successful entrepreneurs and executives. And I was like, well, I don't belong here. But it was the relationships that I built with them pretty instantaneously that made me realize, number one, I do belong here. And number two, I now have people who are like supporting me. Like I am now surrounded by talented people who care about my goals as much as I do. And that was crazy to me. Like I'd never been surrounded with people like that. And I graduated from that program, and I even said in my graduation speech how just backwards my mind frame was when I entered the program, thinking, okay, I've got to I'm not going to go out for drinks. I'm going to stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning reading my case studies because Socratic method is a bitch. And I don't want to be called on the next day in class and not have, a really, solid answer for what the professor is talking to us about. But I realized so quickly that didn't matter. Like what happened in class, people forgot it the next day. It didn't matter. But the relationships that I built ended up being the most important value that I took away from that program. And that was what kind of led me into, okay, could I repeat this experiment? Are there other places in life other than Harvard, right, where you can pull together really cool people who are supportive of one another, sharing some kind of crisis in their moment. And when I say crisis, I mean like you're building a business or you're going through something that's similar as the other person emotionally. And you're sharing that experience, but at the same time, like you're helping each other. And that's one of the reasons why I started one of my communities. It's one of the reasons why I've become really active in the alumni initiatives from my program is that gosh, this is not just Harvard, like this is replicable everywhere. But it has to be curated. It has to be the right people. It has to be the right coming together, like reason for coming together. These folks have to be at some sort of inflection point, wanting some sort of transformation. And so I took the principles that I learned there and started applying them to other types of community development.
It makes a lot of sense, and to be honest, I'm so glad we had this conversation just because it really sheds light for me on like why I appreciate you as a person, as a friend, because that's very similar to how I kind of view things, you know. And what I mean by that is I tend to be a person that it's not easy for me to find people who kind of like think the same way, let's just say, you know, and there's like a specific type, just like you're talking about community curation. And so when you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, and one of the interesting things about just this podcast as just a content or category is that there's a lot of interesting communities that are very different, that are very much about not having like like an exclusivity clause or any kind of like the goal is that no one feels left out, you know, and we'll talk to other folks who are like that. And, you know, I find myself straddling that, you know, between those two because I want to make space for everyone. Right. And at the same time, I don't always, you know, mind meld with everyone easily, if that makes sense, you know, so. But I think that makes a lot of sense with the background you're talking about, the whole figure skating thing, because when you're really competitive, you have like a kind of standard of excellence, right? And so that makes a lot of sense, and that's, you know, kind of how we met each other through Stealth. So I'm curious if you want to share a little bit about the community that you formed there and sort of how things are going or what your thoughts are or experience there.
Sure. Well, it's interesting that you say, you know, you're sort of walking that line between inclusivity and curation.
Right.
With Stealth, for instance, so Stealth is the entrepreneurship mastermind that I founded a couple of years ago that you are a valued member of, and we've got a great group. You know, I think so many of these groups are focused more on either the industry or the process that people might be in the middle of implementing, as opposed to the type of person they are and how they work. So Stealth was founded to be industry agnostic. And the reason I chose that format was because I think that when people come together following either a similar process or in a similar industry, they approach problems from the same way. And then they all are beating their heads against the ground looking for the same solution to the same problem through the same perspective. But when you have people from different industries, that's where creativity thrives, and that's where problem solving can really be taken to the next level. So I said, we're industry agnostic. You have to be a business owner, right? So that was like the one, all right, this is for entrepreneurs, people who are actually running businesses, not for executives, not for people who are, you know, just work in business. You have to own a business. So that was like the one thing. But other than that, I'm like, I don't care if your business makes $10 million or $1 million. I don't care if your business is in SaaS or manufacturing. All I care about is the way that you want to come into this group and support each other. And so we do, and you saw this through the application process and interviews, we really look at how people want to show up for each other in this community when evaluating whether or not they're a right fit. So one of the questions on the application is, tell me a story about a time when you really went out of your way to help out a peer or a colleague. And it's not like a client. Like you can boast about how you help your clients, your customers all day long, but like tell me about a time when you really showed up, and not just, don't fudge this. Be very specific about this very specific time that you went and helped someone. So we're judging more, and I hate the word vibe, but like we are kind of judging more based on vibes, because if someone wants to come and just promote their shit to the group, which is very common in professional communities, or if they're coming in because they need something, like they're in a moment of crisis and all they need to do is take, but they don't have anything to give. Those are the things that we try to filter for when we're looking for community members. But different communities are different and have different needs. That's just sort of where we landed.
Yeah, and you've done a great job with it. I don't think I've ever told you this, but I forget the number. It's like it's only like 2 or 3, but I've bumped into people who I think had gone through like a test intro, like you had more like a temporary open, invite to folks to join or whatever. And both these people, I won't mention names just because I don't have their permission or anything like that, but both just really, really cool people. And they really, really admire like you and the group. And I don't think I've ever told you, but it's cool because it's kind of like, yeah, it has a sort of like a reputation in a good way, without that kind of stuffy exclusivity like we're talking about, and so a high quality of people, and the people really sort of admired the group and what you've done with it. So yeah, pretty cool.
Well, what's different
Go ahead.
about well, I was going to say what's different about community products and every other product or business type in the entire world is that when you're running a community, your customer is your product.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the only reason. Like, and there are definitely, like, I would say, community adjacent products. Like if you're, and I'll use the word guru. I don't like that word,
Yeah.
but like they're guru led. So you have some person who's some sort of subject matter expert. They start a community where people are
Right.
really paying for access to them, whether it be their content, access to their programming, just access to them in general.
Yep.
But
Yep.
hey, they all happen to be in a Slack or a circle or even a Facebook group or whatever. And so they technically have access to each other, and there's some benefits there. But if that were to go away, they would still pay for it because they want access to the expert and the expert's content, right? I was like, that is not what Stealth is whatsoever. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't want people to follow me. Now, I'm working on other community products that are a little bit more like that, and I don't think that they're bad, but it's different when you're really relying on your customers to bring the value to your other customers. And that's why curation is so important. That's why, like,
Sure.
one blowhard in the room that makes everybody feel like shit, and there goes the value, right? So you have to be strict. You have to be strict.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so one of the things I'm still toying with, and so it's kind of funny because here we are in one of the earlier episodes of this podcast, and in the process of that, I mean, my own business, which I'm not going to go into too much, but it's really interested in IRL connection. And so I won't say where or to. You can if you want, but you had moved and shared that you had met somebody in Stealth not long ago, like in person, as one of the earlier folks you had met in the new place you had moved to. So I think that's awesome. By the way, I sometimes miss the East Coast after moving out west.
Not too often, though. Only sometimes, I bet.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's not common for me to miss it. My main thinking here is, do you have any plans for making Stealth something that's more IRL? I'm a real pressure on the time when you're not working to be able to optimize for, finding in-person. You and I know through each other through Stealth, which is virtual, but I'm curious what your plans are or anything like that.
So, well, interestingly, I started Stealth never with the intention for it to be fully virtual. And we've had quite a few in real life events over the now 3 years that I've been running it. What's interesting is when you jumped in, I had major surgery.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
a lot of those in real life events that we were doing did kind of fall to the wayside last year, just simply because
Yep.
I was not able to go and physically host them. So that was always a part of it. But I think it's the same challenge that companies are facing right now with regard to remote work versus in real life work. And that is, say you're starting a company, you want access to the best talent. Well, the best talent isn't necessarily in your town. And so that's why you want to open it up and have like the virtual workers and that. And I think
Yeah.
community is the same
Yeah.
way, right? Like I didn't want to restrict. I was in New York City before, moved to Philadelphia. Totally fine with your audience knowing that. Even though New York City has fantastic, community for startups and entrepreneurs and all of that, most of my friends that I wanted to join my community didn't live in New York. So I'm like, well, I don't want to exclude them from this, even though I do like the in real life stuff. And so I do think that at the end of the day, like most companies are finding, some sort of a hybrid model is probably
Yeah.
best because and that's what's probably going to work for Stealth moving forward as well. I do see members that live here in the Northeast fairly frequently now that I'm back on my feet and recovered. We had a fantastic Christmas party in December. We had folks fly in from England. Two folks flew in from England. We had someone fly in from Colorado. We had someone fly in from North Carolina. We are trying to do more of that, but I also don't want to ever say, okay, no, we're just going to be all in real life now and get rid of our virtual platform and all of that.
Hmm.
It will
Hmm.
always be hybrid for Stealth for that particular
Oh.
community. But I think that if it weren't a business community, if it were
Hmm.
something more centered on just interests or hobbies, definitely in person. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking about now that I've moved to a new city is I
Hmm.
feel like I have a really great, strong network of people that I can talk business with, right? I can either jump on the train and go to New York and see them because there's a lot of them there, or I can jump on Zoom and talk to Stealth members. What I don't have in this brand new city that I've moved to is any community outside of that. So what I'm
Hmm.
actively seeking right now are hobbies. Like I live above like a darts bar, like where you throw
Nice.
darts, right? And I was
Nice.
so pissed off that they don't have leagues. They don't have
Mm.
community nights. They don't have anything. It's basically like you have to make some reservation. You show up with the people you've come with to play, to throw darts, and you have
Mm.
your drink and your burger or whatever. And I'm like, no, no, no. I want something like that. I would go. I've barely thrown darts in my life, but I would go join a darts league just for the purpose of going and meeting these people and having some sort of fun shared thing. And
Yep.
that's where I see this in real life community stuff, like you said, totally thriving. Like these third spaces, they feel like they are competing with each other. It's like, oh, this darts bar thinks it's competing with this other cocktail bar up the street. No, it's competing with Amazon because
Yeah.
really the most frictionless way for me to do any of this is to buy a
Yep.
darts board on Amazon,
Yep.
have it delivered, hang it on the back of my door, and then I can play darts anytime I want. So if
Yep.
it's not like providing me with
Twi-
more than just this experience of throwing darts at a board, then why do it? So that's where I'm betting on. I'm very bullish on these like sort of developing these third spaces that are outside of work, outside of your home
Mhm.
responsibilities, but focused on
Mhm.
your hobbies, your passions, your routines. And that's what I'd love to see more of.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. I don't think I ever told you, but I had, or maybe I did because it would have been earlier on in Stealth. I don't know. But my business used to help sort of power the experience that you're describing for like a competitive karaoke league in Washington, D.C.
Love it.
So, you'd have somebody go and have a showdown and they would vote in the app for like the red team or the blue team, say who won or whatever. So it's funny that you should say that because I think that's what I'm noticing too, as I'm kind of really focused on the events sort of thing right now. Something that I'm noticing is that there's such a flood of, there's a million websites that list the same, big musicians that come to town, which is like
Aw.
everybody knows, like you're not going to miss it. But it's all the things in the middle and the very low attendance tier or whatever that they're the most authentic, right? Because that's where you get a chance to actually talk to people. I actually I don't like concerts. It's just like, I guess I'm an old person. It's loud and I can't talk to anyone, you know what I mean? I like live music as long as it's like quiet enough that when I shout, the person next to me can hear me. You know what I mean?
I think that these are the types of places that don't make money from butts and seats, but make
Yeah.
money from bar tabs or make
Yeah.
money from like the because
Yep.
obviously there's the
Yep.
arenas, there's the venues for major events, and that's its own business,
Yep.
and that's great. It's not going to go away. Every once in a while, some artist comes to town. I'm like, oh, I'm a huge fan, and I'll go to something like that. But I
Yep.
agree, like it's what can somebody afford to do, and is it frictionless enough for them to do once a week? What can they
Hmm.
actually work into their routine, and
Yep.
how can they begin engaging with their local community and their neighbors? Um,
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting because, the challenge I had was that I worked on that and I had a co-founder who, like, all respect, I don't have any, bad feelings or anything. We tried to make it work, but he wanted to solve that problem, that you're talking about first. And I just kind of, I just had this really strong conviction that you have to first, like, solve the discovery problem, because the biggest problem is that you don't know about that existing, right?
yeah.
And it's hard to find because there's no hip websites that tell you about it. It's just not a cool thing to talk about the darts league. Nobody cares about the chess club. Now, granted, the whole point of this and why I'm, trying to highlight people's stories is to help change that, right? Because I
Hmm.
think that, human connection is ultimately what we're talking about. And I mean, I was a person who didn't leave my house much. When I was younger, I played a lot of video games. I was a person on the computer. I've been on the computer for 20 years now. It's a long time, so I'm trying to change that. Anyway, back to the question about stealth, because I think you're talking about hybrid. So when you talk about IRL, I'm curious, beyond informal meeting, is there any thoughts that you have about any of this for stealth, about the IRL component?
So you guys have been asking for a retreat for
Okay,
the last couple of years, and I think that that's
nice.
certainly something that we're going to start working on now that I have a little bit more time to think about it, because something like that does involve quite a lot of planning. People would be coming
Hmm.
in, looking at just going to put a location out there. Asheville, North Carolina is a place where we
Nice.
actually have a decent hub of members.
In October, the leaves changing in Asheville
It's
is a
beautiful.
legendary thing.
The mountains are gorgeous, and they have all these sort of little like mountain resort cabins, like we can rent like sort of a
Hmm.
group of cabins or something. And
Yeah, yeah.
so we've been talking about that. um and then, really just looking at how we can, for the members who are close to one another, create something that's a little bit more consistent, right? So I'm now in Philadelphia. We do have a couple of members here in Philadelphia. Rather than meeting up every once in a while for a happy hour or something like that, one of the things that I've
Hmm.
been thinking about doing is I found this local chef in the like Facebook
Nice.
group for my neighborhood,
Yep.
and she does like little mini cooking classes in your home. So I'm like, okay, how cool would it be for the people who are in sort of the tri-state area here to do like a monthly cooking class where we're not talking
Yep.
about business. It's just coming together to
Yep.
learn a very cool new skill and have some wine and learn how to make sushi or whatever the case may
Yep.
be. So
Yep.
we're exploring some stuff like that as well. And again, it kind of comes back to like, when we're in real life, do we want to be talking about business?
Hmm.
Because we do business all day. We
Yeah.
do business on Zoom. We do business in the programming, our accountability sprints and our brain
Yep.
trusts and all, like
Yep.
that is all
Yep.
business, business, business. But when we connect in real life, like if there's not a cocktail in my hand, I'm bored. Like let's do something that has nothing to do with business and connect in other ways.
Yeah, and that brings me back again to the sort of like lone wolf versus community dichotomy, just thinking about that. And I appreciate that about you. Like, um, it's a little bit like unexpected for me to hear. So it's no surprise because I'm your competitive figure skater. It's so like that has the lone wolf component. But then I know you as this community person, right? Like that's our experience together. And so it keeps bringing me back to this thing about how, you know. how did, you know, it's interesting. Did you, coming out of Harvard, so I'm kind of going back to what we were talking about
Mhm.
before, the Harvard program that you were in, and realizing, like you said, that, hey, maybe I need some help and maybe I can't do this on my own, right? Like a lot of people learn that about business and networking and stuff like that. But I wonder I wonder what it is that just gave you this sort of spark of insight where, a lot of people struggle to get beyond um, a transactional relationship.
Mm.
I mean, in many different ways, right? Whether that's romantic relationships, I think often happens too, friendships, business relationships, all of them. And so I've always appreciated that you're very sort of willing to go out of your way for people, and I wonder if you have thoughts about where that comes from in the sense that, how do I want to say this? I guess, like, you can really tell when somebody really cares about wanting, to facilitate you connecting, which I believe from you, just trying to get to the next thing that they're wanting out of the relationship.
Hmm. So I think that this has, oh my, it's such a good question, and I have two different answers to this, but they kind of connect.
Hmm.
First, I'm going to answer what you just asked, but first I'm going to say that I am a great community manager. I'm not a fantastic community member.
Okay.
I will say that one of the reasons why I was able to transition from, as you said, lone wolf into being a
Yeah.
community leader
Yeah.
is because I like being in control.
Hmm.
I was
Sure.
never good at like I hated the
Hmm.
Girl Scouts growing up. Like my parents put me in Girl Scouts. I'm like I used to say as like an 8-year-old, I used to say I hate organized fun. Just let me go
Yeah.
do my own thing or organize my own thing. Like I wanted to be in control of it. So
Yeah.
I can connect those dots and see why I became like I'm not just in the alumni association. I run the alumni association. Even the communities that I'm in, I still take on some sort of a leadership role within them usually. So I do think that there's something to be said for I just like to control shit, and for better or for worse, that's my personality type.
So for me, I relate to that also. And I just, like, sometimes I feel bad because I'm like, oh man, does this make other people feel bad? I don't know. Maybe that's not you, but I'm curious if you ever, struggle with that over the years.
Well, sometimes I struggle with overstepping, for sure. Like in other communities or things that I'm working on, and I've had
Sure.
to very
Yeah.
intentionally remind myself, hey, I'm not in control of this room, this person is, or I'm not in
Yeah.
control of the way this program gets executed, this person is, and
Hmm.
have to step back because I don't want to be an asshole, right? I don't want to steal
Yeah.
anyone else's thunder
Yeah.
or what they want to do. But I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question? It was
I was just saying, I was simply asking if
if I
wanting
ever
to be
feel
in
bad.
control is
Yeah.
something that, like, you struggle with, feeling like maybe you shouldn't or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say only when it takes away from what someone else is trying to achieve, right? Like
Sure.
I don't want to be that person. And
Hmm.
so that's just a personality obstacle I've had to learn how to work through.
Yeah.
But your other
Makes
question
sense.
is why am I so nice? You said that.
Yeah.
Let's put this on the record. Like why am I nice? Why am I genuine when it comes to trying to help others and make connections for others? And I think that that really stems from getting completely burnt out at work and
Hmm.
not giving a fuck about it anymore. Like really not caring about my own career progression anymore. And a few years ago, around the same time I started really getting into kind of community development stuff, I redefined what wealth means to me. I redefined what
Okay.
success means to me because for the
Nice.
vast majority of my life, wealth meant money
Hmm.
and success meant being prestigious, right? Being,
Hmm.
achieving great things.
Yep.
And that shifted for me recently. It shifted into what is actually wealth to me. Well, wealth is flexibility, it's relationships, and it's really just the impact that I'm having to small groups of people, not like having this massive impact on the world that I become known for. And I think that
Yeah.
shift is probably what Because I think
Got
if I was running a community and I was also running a business where I was trying to like scale it rapidly and
it.
exit and have like, then I might be looking, well, and I know that you're doing that right now, or trying to at least.
Well, no. I mean, no. I was laughing for the opposite reason. I've spent
Okay.
2 years building this thing. I've spent too much money on it, but I just believe in it to maybe a
Yeah.
fault. And so, yeah, I'm not like, let me sell this thing tomorrow. But continue.
Well, exactly. So you understand. If I were really focused on my career in that way, then I think I'd probably look at relationships more transactionally. I don't think I
Yeah.
would be willing as I am to kind of put my neck out on the line for others. And it's really because I don't have that. That's no longer my goal. Because
Mm,
when we do have that goal, it's only natural for us to look at relationships and people as mechanisms to help us reach what we're doing. And I just have different goals now.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think for me, by the way, this is just a total fun aside. Are you familiar with, everybody knows personality stuff. I don't know which ones you're familiar with, like there's Myers-Briggs, there's
Hmm.
Enneagram, there's DISC. Have you ever heard? That's a newer
I've
one
done
for me.
disc. Yeah.
DISC. Yeah. I bet we're the same on that. What's your DISC profile?
So I've taken all of these because pretty much
Hmm.
every corporation I've ever worked for forces you to
Yeah.
do it in some
Does it?
HR
Yeah.
shit. And
Sure. Yeah.
I couldn't tell you though. Like I know I've taken all
Okay.
of these tests.
That's okay.
I have, but like I don't remember what my results are. But I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done DISC, and I've done. Have you ever seen Belbin's team roles?
No, that's a new one to me.
That it's been around for a long time, but that's the only one that I remember. And it's
Mm.
probably because it was the first one I ever took. I was 22 and it was my very first corporate, like
Hmm.
my first big girl
Hmm.
job.
Hmm.
And I realized that I was at that point, I was what they call a shaper. So I was like the leader. But
Nice.
like my
Shaper.
least one, like, because they give you like what you're most like and then what you're least like. And my least one was the coordinator. So my least one was the person who actually puts the shit together. But how funny is it that I've like, that's now just opposite.
Mm.
I feel like I'm the
Hmm.
person, the detail oriented person putting shit together now
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
supporting the shapers. Whereas back
Hmm.
then, I was 100% the shaper. Like, I didn't want to be messed around with details. I was the one that was like
Hmm.
clearing the path, for the
Hmm.
direction we wanted to go. So I know that one I've definitely like
Hmm.
has
Interesting.
flopped. Yeah.
Well, and that's so the one I was thinking about. The two that I find most interesting are like Enneagram and DISC. I like DISC because it doesn't try to, like Myers-Briggs takes four like spectrums and then like it's like there's too many. There's like 16 of them or whatever now or something like that. And by the time you like enumerate all of the permutations, but with DISC there's just four and you're like probably one or two of them. And on that one, I'm going to fail to remember the I, but the D is dominant and the I is, it has to do with like sort of interpersonal synergy. They also call that like charming or something like that. And so the funny part is I'm going to guess that you're also DI. That's there's like the helper, the person who likes to be in the background. There's the like compassionate person who really cares about everything being fair or something like that. But anyway, that's just something for you to think about. I'm pretty sure that would be it.
I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if we scored equally on all of those
Yeah.
personality tests.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, cool. Well, I feel like we could go on forever, but I'll insert some humanity into this and say that I got the flu. My throat is struggling to keep up, and I think that
No.
it's a good time to probably wrap it up before I turn into a frog and you're talking and then nothing comes out when I go to respond.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry you're not feeling good. It's been going around, man. Lots of folks have been kicking
Yep.
it with the flu. I'm sorry you're not feeling good, but I couldn't tell throughout this conversation. You were very
Well,
warm
that's
and
good.
very engaged. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah. No, I just figure there's so many places we could go, but my goal is sort of like an hour or less, and I figure it's a good stopping point.
Sounds great.
Anything you want to share, like I want to make this about the story of the guest. And so that includes like any kind of plugs, like this is meant for you to share what you're doing or whatever you want an audience that hopefully you want to share this with to hear about.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. My biggest ask right now is I always love welcoming new people to the drunk business advice community. So when I say it's a community of like-minded individuals who don't talk to each other because, gosh, that would be hard to put together, but subscribers. So yeah, anyone who is interested in subscribing to drunk business advice, I'm always happy to have new subscribers there.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, and that's how we met. As I said, I'm a big fan, and it's on a list of 1.5 or something emails that I read. So good job with it. It's well written, and I know that you put a lot of time into it. I've heard about that. Someday, I'm not gonna do this to you on the podcast. Someday I'm gonna get you to tell me how many people subscribed, but not right now. I'm
All
very
right.
curious.
Sounds good. And one thing that I will say, final note, because you're right, we did meet through that. One of the best things that you can do to attract amazing people into your orbit is to produce content. It's sort of like
Mm-hmm.
networking times 10
Yep.
because not only are you attracting really awesome people, you're repelling people who don't jive with you. So, one of the best ways that you can meet people is just whether it's posting on LinkedIn or writing a newsletter or writing a blog, just getting your thoughts and ideas out there is such a hack for really pulling really cool people into your world.
Yeah, I boiled myself down to just LinkedIn. I canceled all the other social networks, and I'm happy with keeping it. And I've kind of worked on developing my own voice there, and so I agree with you. I think it's great
Mhm.
advice. So
Awesome.
cool. All right, Kristen. Well, until next time, happy trails, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Brian.